In this video, we're going to talk about processing data. We're going to break that down into several sub-subjects: creating a case, adding evidence, selecting processing options, processing data, tracking the progress of the case, and then we'll touch on a few other subjects as well: custodians, case evidence, and data evidence. These all have their own videos. These other topics all have their own videos, so we won't spend too much time on them. They're significant in and of their own right, but less related to processing and more just sort of tangentially related than certainly these other topics. So let's hop into the tool. So obviously we're coming here to the processing data widget. And when I said we're talking about processing data, I'm referring specifically to this tab. More so than the entire widget. We're not going to touch on import. We're not going to touch on preview evidence. So first, let's talk about creating a case. There's a video on creating a case. I'm sure you already know how to do it, but it is somewhat relevant here. So you can obviously process data into an existing case. You would just select that case up here. All of these are cases. Any one of them you could bring evidence into. When you select a case, you'll get a view of what evidence has already been brought into that case. In this situation, we just want to process, we want to create a new case. And you can do that by coming here and simply typing the name of the case you want. And we'll call it video demo case. And you can put spaces. Somehow I just don't ever really do that, but sure, I'm sure you guys would prefer spaces, so let's just do that. Video demo case. If we want to enter the path for this case, we can. Otherwise, it will default to the default case path. And if you have your environment set up correctly, that should be where you want it anyway. And now we just come here and click Create Case. And it's going to spin, and in the background, it's going to go ahead and do what's ever necessary to create a case. Depending on your system, this can actually be a little bit slower than you'd expect it to be, but you only have to do it once. On my system, it's not quite so bad. It should pop up here any second, but I've seen it take quite a lot longer on other systems. So you can see it's created the case, and we know that because it filled out this information. There's the path it's in. There's the case ID. This ends up being a very important number. If I want to add additional attributes to this case and save them and associate them to the case, I can. But this, again, is one of those other features we're going to talk about entirely in a different video. It's on the case management video. So refer to that if you're interested in this stuff. But we're not going to do it today. In addition, we could add custodians if we wanted to. If we wanted to add custodians to this case, this is the place to do it. And that is also addressed in the custodian video, so we're not going to do that now either. Instead of that, let's just come and add our evidence. And we do that by clicking here. And that will open up a dialog box. And then this should be set up to the server location. You can enter any machine name you want here that stores your evidence. It always takes a little bit to load this page initially, but once it loads, it's pretty responsive. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so we're going to go to evidence. Oh, shoot, I've clicked too many times. There we go. Evidence. And we're going to process this demo folder. In this demo folder is a bunch of files and a bunch of loose folders, loose pieces of evidence. It is important to note that if you process a file, if you click on a file that just contains loose pieces of evidence, no subfolder, it will pull in each piece of evidence independently. And that has to do with people that are trying to process hundreds of disk images, and it's just a huge pain in the butt for them to have to select each option individually. But if you as a user want to process a folder, let's say, that has hundreds of loose files in it, just make sure you drop one empty folder in that file, in that folder, or process its parent folder, whatever, and then you'll get the desired effect. But in any event, let me just go ahead and select on this. We won't face that issue here. So you can see our case was added. We can add multiple pieces of evidence if we want. And then we want to see that, make sure that evidence was added correctly. We click on that. And the critical thing is the media type. There are 3 different media types we support: a folder of images, a disk image itself, or a file or folder. If it's a disk image, this follows the same rules FTK does. If it's a disk image, make sure you point at the first file. Like if it's an EO1, you want to point at the EO1 and not the EO2, EO3, and then it will process in fine. But you got to make sure you have this correct, or the processing will fail. Custom fields are the same thing that apply the same topic we were talking about over here, which is custom data fields for a case. These are custom data fields for evidence. Again, we're not going to deal with that in this video. That's the case management video. If we have already processed this data, we could click on Show Processing Options, and it would show us the options with which this data was already processed. Since we haven't processed it yet, this would not produce anything for us. And in addition, custodians, we spoke about how that's in a different video, so we won't touch on that. But if you'd add custodians to the case, they'd be here to select from as a drop-down list, and you could associate this evidence with a custodian. You don't have to click Save Fields or Delete Fields. That's, again, only relevant if you're doing custom fields. So we're happy here. We've added our evidence, and it was added correctly. Now we're going to the most complex phase of the process, which is choosing our processing options. If you don't have processing templates already set up, you will only be confronted with this Customize Options button. There is a video for setting up your processing option templates, so refer to that if you want to know how to do that. I've got a few set up here, as you can see. But for the sake of this video, we're going to go straight into customizing options. Oops, I right-clicked instead. And you can see there are just a lot of different processing things you can do if you so choose. These first 4 should be familiar to any FTK user. These remaining 4 are new to Quincy and contain some pretty powerful capabilities. For this video, we're going to make things quick, so we're just going to take an MD5 hash. And again, there's a whole video on the processing options. In fact, I think there are several videos on it. But nonetheless, there's more than enough information out there if you want to know what these options each do. But we don't need to do that. We're just going to go ahead with the MD5 hash. And we select that, and look, this turns red. It means that options have been selected. We're going to go ahead and click Process Data. We would only click checked items if we were processing stuff in the grid. If we were doing initial analysis on data we had already processed, which we are not doing here. We're going to go ahead and click Process. It's going to ask us if we want an email on completion. Let's go ahead and enter an email. And then we have 3 options here. We can cancel and choose not to process. We can move forward and process, and then this email will be utilized, will be sent an email when the processing is done. Or if we change our mind and we don't want this email, or we didn't enter one, we can go ahead and click here and process without email on completion, which means it will just go ahead and finish processing and be done. Now, before I click these buttons, I want to point out one thing. There is another video on job messaging. Processing is a key job in that whole job messaging concept. And what job messaging is, really quickly, let me jump out and jump into my messaging center. Let's wait as this loads. This is a reactive widget. It only loads when you need it. Job messaging is here. And job messaging allows you to set up approvers or notifications for certain users. So you can see this guy has been set up as an approver for every job type that we allow. And one of those is process data. And that means when I go ahead and click process, let's go forward with this. Instead of the job actually submitting and saying it's time to go, we're processing, it's just going to submit the job. See, it has requested that this job be done, but it hasn't actually started. For this job to start, an approver needs to go and approve the job, which we will quickly do right over here. I have that email. We should see that right there. We're going to approve that job. And now when we click, we should see ourselves hop into either submitted mode or in progress. In progress. Perfect. Now, there are 3 bars or 3 sort of sections here to the job progress monitoring system. I don't know, whatever you want to call it here. But for this table, you've got enumerated, you've got processed, and you've got indexed. The first thing that's going to happen, it's going to count up how many files there are, and this enumerated number will grow. It will grow in several increments. For example, it will first look at all the files and it'll say there are 200 files here. But then if one of those files is a PST, after it says 200, it'll pause a while, it will find the PST, and it will enumerate the contents of the PST. And so the 200 may go ahead and jump to 2,000 or 2 million or whatever the number is. Anyway, it will enumerate these files. It will then slowly start to process them. And had we chosen indexing, it would then index them. And each one of those will get monitored with a bar, a progress bar. So let's click refresh. And you can see we've enumerated 4,542. We can just keep clicking refresh if we want to know what's going on. We can always set up polling, and then it will poll every 5 minutes and update this chart. Or we can just ignore it and wait for the email that we set up for email on completion. Depending on how large a case this is, I prefer the latter and just waiting to get the email. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Actually, before I do that, let's go check to see if it's... There we go. It completed really quickly. No need to pause the video. There just wasn't that much data. Now let's just go quickly check to see that our data has come through. I've already forgotten what we called this case. We called it video demo case. So let's close this. We come in here. We're going to log into our case, video demo case. And let's open our grid. And hopefully we'll see a bunch of data and it will successfully populate for us. Voila, it did great. And if let's go to the documents, and all the metadata is here, and we're in a good spot. Now, note we did not index. So if we come back to here and we expand this again, we'll see nothing was indexed. Now we're like, oh gosh, we've looked at this, we realized this is exactly the data we want to go ahead and index that. We can do it like this. Right click here, select processing options, and select process objects. You see the same familiar screen we just saw. These other 2 parts are collapsed. They're still there. If you wanted to expand them, you could, but there's no need. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and process, but this time we're going to use checked items. I could check a few items. I could check all the items in the grid, but if I leave nothing checked, it will do the entire case, which is what I want in this instance. Let's go ahead and just do the full FTK processing options. If you want to see what those are, by the way, you can always select on any of your templates and click Customize again. And it will show you what options are selected in your template. Give it a second to load, and you can go see that we've got search index selected, which means it will index the items. So we're happy with that. We're going to click cancel. We don't need to change it. Just go click FTK. And now we're going to do checked items. We don't need an email, so I'll just proceed without an email. And it says, run additional analysis on all filtered items. Please confirm. And we say, yes, we're happy. And it's going to go ahead and proceed. Okay, that was a lot more anticlimactic than I thought. I thought we'd get some time to watch it process, but it zipped through this data. And let's see what it is it did. It enumerated a whole bunch of objects. Obviously, it ran into the PSTs, which we didn't previously expand. It processed them, and it indexed them. And that was all done with the FTK processing options. So now if we go ahead and enter a search, let's just double check that our index successfully worked. We should get search results. Previously, and there we go, perfect, 213, which I happen to know is the right response to the search term federal. So there you go, that's the processing widget. We processed, we added evidence, we processed the evidence, we performed additional analysis on that evidence, and now I think we're basically done. Again, there's a whole another set of videos on the processing options as well as these other options, other tabs if you're interested. So I'd encourage you to go look at those. But that's all I had for now. Thank you very much.